You're listening to the Optimal Performance Podcast.
How's it going, everyone? It's Chris from Optimal Performance. This is episode 5. And in today's episode, we're going to be going into some nutritional fundamentals and trying to sort of come away from some of the stigmas that you may find. So we're still in January. People are still sort of getting into extremes with nutrition and strategies for eating, as we touched on in episode 3 with the fasting type stuff. So today we're going to go through some fundamentals of nutrition, talking about deficits, talking about how to get into a surplus, and then also sort of how to improve the current sort of habits that you are using currently. So we've basically took some notes down, what Nathan has got on the phone there, of like sort of common questions that we receive from clients, some common things that clients may say that they may hear on the internet and from sort of guru type people. So we're going to basically run through fundamentals of nutrition and then basically try to come away from some of the typical stigmas that you may hear, especially at this time of year. So we're gonna touch over to Nathan, who's got the notes there, and we're basically gonna create a framework from top to bottom, basically in terms of like what the fundamentals of nutrition are. So we're gonna pass over to Nathan, who's gonna start with basal metabolic rate. So we'll dive into what that is, how to kind of work it out, and then talk about why it's important. So let's touch into Coach Scuppers.
Right. So first things first, when we're trying to adopt a new style of eating or adopt a new diet, the first thing we need to do is work out our calories. And there's many formulas out there you can use, but the most common among scientific literature is the Harris-Benedict Formula. And it's basically just an online calculator. So what we'll do is we'll plug the link in the comment section. So if anyone's interested, you can click on it and go and work out your calories. We're going to start with BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. So basically it's, if you was to lie down on a bed and not move at all, your body still requires a certain amount of energy to stay alive. Whether that's blinking, breathing, your heartbeat, your body still needs energy to do all those things, and that makes up the majority of your calorie intake.
Yeah, so BMR is a big one. Like we've just had a little chat sort of off the podcast then about a couple of females I've coached in the past who like basically eat under the basal metabolic rate. So like when you're setting up like nutritional targets or like strategies, a lot of people who come into me, especially a female audience who are looking to change body composition, when you continually eat in a chronic deficit below your basal metabolic rate but expect your body to change, it's pretty difficult to do because you're not fueling training performance, you're not fueling recovery. So like this is the minimum amount of energy you require. Obviously day-to-day variance, you can come below the number that the formula will give you, but if you spend an exposed period of time eating under your basal metabolic rate, and you're expecting your body composition and the way you look to change, common thing girls come in and say is like, I want a bigger ass, I want toned arms. That requires you to build tissue. So if you continually eat under your basal metabolic rate, the exact opposite thing is going to happen. You're probably going to drop scale weight really quick, which is great, but that's not the way to take body fat off the frame and increase tissue. Obviously you're going to drop scale weight, but if you're looking to change composition and change the way you look, chronically eating under basal metabolic rate, which I know a lot of girls do, is probably not the way to go. So it's as Nathan said, it's the baseline energy that you need for your body to function. If you chronically eat under that, I can guarantee your training performance is going to be poor. Sleep, energy levels, everything outside of the gym is going to become worse. You're going to be exposed to illnesses, immune system's probably going to become poorer. So like if any girls are listening / watching and you feel like you're in a chronic deficit, the first thing I would do is probably say jump onto Google, type in the Harris-Benedict Formula, and if you've got a coach or you are eating underneath your BMR, it's probably time to reassess and have a little think about longevity within that metric. So off the back of basal metabolic rate, we've got to take into account then like what we do on top of that in terms of a baseline sort of output. So basal metabolic rate is what you need as a minimum to sort of obviously allow the body to function at rest, as we've touched on. Then on top of that, we've got to think about stuff what like obviously our body does to move. So the likes of getting up and downstairs, fidgeting, hoovering, walking to pick the kids up and back from school, that type of stuff. So we're going to touch into Nathan again to go through the principle of NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And then obviously when we pair in basal metabolic rate with NEAT, obviously the requirement for more energy again becomes bigger. So like you have your basal metabolic rate, which would be if you to just sit in bed all day or lay down. And then NEAT is obviously output. So then when you combine these two metrics, this is where you can begin to sort of map out calorie requirements, what you need based on your lifestyle, based how active you are, which is what you will see on the formulas in terms of like when you're looking for calorie and macronutrient targets further down the line. This is one of the big ones that we have to take into account, and one that you should sort of look into to begin to move the needle towards what your actual requirements are.
Yeah, so as Chris has just touched on there, NEAT is everything we're doing outside of the gym or outside of regular exercise. And it's really important actually because it takes up about 15% of your actual energy expenditure throughout the day. So you're actually going to burn more calories doing things like Chris has said, walking up the stairs, going for a walk, washing the dishes, doing hoovering. So movement is actually probably the most important, especially for those who are looking to drop scale weight. So in terms of energy expenditure, it's actually the most important. So it doesn't matter. We've spoke this on previous podcasts where we're looking at people who go to the gym or go for a workout just to burn calories, but that actually only makes up around 5% of your total energy expenditure. So you're tripling it by just moving around more. So for people who are actively trying to lose weight and drop scale weight, drop body fat, the main thing is just to keep moving.
Yeah, it's a big one because the thing you do outside of the gym, and this is purely from like a body composition or a weight loss perspective, what you do outside the gym matters more. So if you go to the gym for 45 minutes a day and you're looking to drop body fat, but then you spend the other 23 hours of the day just laying on the couch watching Netflix, it's going to become difficult. You're going to hit like a plateau where like you need more energy out, which is going to be the stuff like walking, maybe going for a run outside of the gym, or just becoming more active. This is where you see loads of coaches prescribing like steps, targets and that type of thing. It's to promote getting more energy out so that you can ultimately sort of drop body fat and scale weight. So like what you do outside of the gym from a weight loss perspective probably matters more. What you do inside the gym is going to be like how you elicit a response in terms of like building tissue, getting stronger, changing your body composition. So that argument between just losing scale weight, a lot of people will go towards steps or just running on a treadmill. If you want your body to look different, you need to ultimately try and increase muscle mass. So for males and females, if you want to improve body composition, the scales probably will come down at some point, but what you do in the gym is going to allow you to change composition. What you do outside the gym is going to dictate where the scales probably go in terms of like, are you in a total deficit? Are you in a surplus? Do you move a lot, or do you just train for 45 minutes a day and then lay down? People who are looking to lose scale weight at this time of year, it probably matters more what you do outside the gym in terms of how active you are, which then feeds into obviously like what your numbers should be if you eat in that way in terms of calorie targets and that type of thing. So yeah, it's an important place to start basically when you are setting up your nutritional targets.
Yeah, it's everything down to if you have a massive bottle of water at your desk or at home, if you're working from home, don't have a massive bottle of water. Have a small glass of water and take regular trips from where you're working to the fridge, to the sink, and get your water there. The fact that you're having a massive bottle of water means that you're not getting off your seat. So you're not having those little steps that you would normally take if you were in the office or if you were out and about and going to the shops and stuff like that. Instead of taking the car, just take a walk to the shops. It probably takes you just as much time, but you're getting those steps in. Just simple things like that, walking up and down the stairs instead of taking one trip and carrying everything, juggling things down the stairs. Just take a couple of trips. You've got another 3 flights of stairs there in one day.
Yeah, that's it. And increasing NEAT for everybody on the planet's going to be beneficial. So like, as you're saying there, like, can you take the stairs instead of the lift at work? Can you get out your desk chair a little bit more often? Can you increase walking? Can you, say for example, you work Monday to Friday, classic 9 to 5, can you add an additional 30-minute walk in on a Wednesday and a Friday night? You're ticking 2 boxes at once, you're getting physical activity, you're moving more, you're getting more energy out. And let's be honest, at this time of year, pretty much everybody's looking to drop the scales and lose weight, aren't they? Like pretty much everybody within like the industry will be pushing like, let's lose weight, let's drop body fat. And if you come out the blocks too aggressive and you're eating under your basal metabolic rate, this is the big stigma around the deficit, because if you're just in a chronic deficit, it gets harder to put more energy out. So then, like, if you're eating under your basal metabolic rate, you might not have the energy to get off the couch. You might be laying there for 23 hours a day, just sort of flatlining your body. So, like, the deficit culture is correct in terms of, like, you do need to be in that to drop body fat and scale weight. But sometimes increasing calories allows you to create more expenditure. So you might be able to push a little bit more in the gym. You might have the energy to get off the couch and sort of get out for an extra walk and stuff. And as we've just touched on a little bit, it goes a little bit deeper than just your 45-minute session in the gym. It's what you do outside of that. So just being in a chronic deficit forever, for me, is not the way. You have to pick and choose your moments, and increasing calories allows you to get more calories out, because you're going to have more energy. You're going to feel like you've got more push in the gym. So like, it's not always just about deficit steps and blah blah blah. It's about finding how you fit that in, and increasing expenditure in other ways other than just let's do a gym session. Yeah,
it's a fine line between being in a deficit but also having enough calories to live your life and to operate and to do the energy expenditure that you need to do. That's where your calculations come into it, and that's where your professionals and the people that can prescribe like nutrition plans and stuff like that, that's where it comes into it, and that's where you will benefit the most, is from these specific plans.
With that, like, it's as a coach, and like obviously like I help a variety of different people, from athletes to just gen pop who are just looking to lose weight. It's very easy to just give somebody what they want. So like, if somebody comes into me and says, I want to lose 2 stone by June, very easy to just get them there as quick as possible. But it's the maintenance of where they go. So like, if I have a female come into me, have a look into the nutrition, get them to track for a couple of weeks, look at eating patterns, look at like where the total calories lie each day on an average, look at the macronutrient split, look at the response on the scales. There's like the first part of the job. Now for me, if I just say, right, I'm just going to put you on 1,300 calories a day, they're going to lose scale weight. They're gonna start to see that, and that might be what they want, but what they actually need long term is different. So like, as we're saying there, like a BMR, like for me, most fully grown women on the planet shouldn't be eating 1,300 calories. If you've got a high-end job, you might have kids, you work full-time, then you add in stress, then you add in training 3 times a week. That's a lot of output. So like, your body needs fuel to cope with that output. You need to fuel training performance, so you get the adaptation in the gym. Your energy balance then, as we're touching on, dictates whether the scales go down or up. The NEAT obviously adds onto that in terms of where your energy expenditure is, but wants and needs are 2 different things. It's very easy to just put someone on low calories and go, right, the scales are coming down. But if you can't maintain the scales coming down and they don't feel great and they've got no option to increase NEAT because they've got no energy to do anything, it comes into what people want versus what people need, and you always need to give people what they need. And it comes off the back of this from a nutritional standpoint, is looking into BMR first of all, looking into NEAT, and then beginning to build out targets, like in terms of one way of doing it. So yeah, we'll maybe go into some other stuff in terms of like where we can go with that and how we can start to look into total calories and macronutrients and that type of thing. So yeah, we'll get on to the next touch point with Nathan there.
Yeah, so I think that just brings us nicely on to EAT, which is exercise, activity, thermogenesis. So simply, it's just how many calories you're actually burning through planned exercise. But as we've touched on, it's probably the smallest amount, around 5% of your energy expenditure. So again, we touched on in previous podcasts, people going to the gym just to burn calories, or looking at the watches, burnt 1,000 calories, that sort of stuff. But there's the far bigger picture, like we've just spoke about, NEAT being the most important. So yeah, that's a very basic one. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, in terms of adaptation, strength, physical fitness, that's what we're training for. We're not training to burn calories. So people need to get out of that headspace where they're like, I need to go to the gym, I need to get my steps in on the step machine, I need to burn 1,000 calories on my watch, because that's not what you're there for. You're there for, as you've said, body composition, or to get physically fitter, stronger, faster, that sort of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about EAT in terms of deficit. NEAT's, like you've just said, NEAT's the most important, and the easiest way to create a deficit is just to move more. So yeah, so I think that just brings us on now to the final part of the TDE, is the thermic effect of food. And basically all this is just a posh way of saying how many calories your body, or how much energy your body uses when it digests food. So I think we know now that protein is the highest, or has the highest thermic effect of food. So it means you're going to burn more calories via eating a high protein diet. So in terms of trying to drop scale weight or get yourself in a deficit, it can help. And we also know that protein is the most satiating macronutrient as well. So we're going to feel fuller for longer, as well as it actually using more energy to be digested.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a lot of people obviously know this, but for anybody who doesn't, obviously each macronutrient has a specific return. So in terms of energy that it gives to your body, so for protein, you're going to get, for 1 gram, you're going to return 4 calories regardless of what that protein source is. If you eat 1 gram of protein, you're going to get 4 calories. Carbohydrates is the exact same. You're going to get 4 calories per gram. And then when we look into fat, this is where you will see like diet culture in terms of what we've touched on in previous episodes with like the Mediterranean diet, the fasting. Fat is the most energy dense macronutrient. So for 1 gram, you're going to return 9 calories. And this is where we look at like sort of low fat diets and the Weight Watchers culture that's based around pulling total calories down by going low fat, because it's the most energy dense macronutrient, and as we've touched on the other ones, it's obviously a very important macronutrient, which touches into the diet culture and that type of stuff, as we've said. So yeah, when you're building out nutritional targets and stuff, obviously these are the things that matter. So your macronutrients, your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fats, how many grams you eat of them macronutrients are going to equate to your total calories. And as Nathan's saying, the thermic effect, especially of protein, is the highest. So like, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think if you have 1 gram of protein, which returns 4 calories, I think by the time your body is actually digested and utilised, I think it kind of halves. So it ends up like roughly being around 2 calories. So this is why protein is so important in terms of regeneration, in terms of like recovery from training, recovery from gym sessions, and then also, as Nathan's touched on, the big one is satiety. So like feeling fuller for longer, especially when you're dieting. That's a thing that you want to happen. You want to feel fuller for longer, because ultimately you are eating less than what your body needs, regardless of how you put that. And as we've said, a lot of people eat a lot less or too little for what they need. Becomes difficult to increase NEAT and all that type of stuff, and then they might plateau and go, right, where'd you go then? Do you increase activity further, or do you pull calories down lower? Like, I know girls who are eating 1,000 calories a day. They're doing an hour on a treadmill, they're lifting weights 3 times a week, they're doing spinning. It's like nothing's happening there. There's no recovery. You need to sort of have recovery and energy in. They matter. So like, if you're eating too little and your activity levels through the roof, it gets very difficult to recover from your training. So if you're looking to change the way you look, these numbers matter. So the low-hanging fruit is definitely to not spend too long eating under your basal metabolic rate. And then we've got to add real life on top of that, which is the stress, the job, kids, walking to the shop and back, anything. Like, you've got to add that on top. You don't start at BMR and then pull under that and just go, right, you're on 1,300 calories, or for a lad, you're on 1,900 calories, like the old school generic, like 2,000 or 2,500 calories a day for a male and female. It goes a little bit deeper, and it's got to be a little bit more specific to the individual based on their lifestyle. And then all the other metrics like height, weight, and the other stuff as we touch on for a specific calorie and macronutrient target, which I know a lot of people do just prescribe nowadays, but it always goes deeper, as we've said on previous podcasts.
Yeah, just a bit of a bonus one. We had a question on the previous podcast about alcohol and training, but alcohol is actually the 4th macronutrient. A lot of people don't realise that per gram of alcohol you consume actually returns 7 calories. And now alcohol is metabolised the exact same way as the other 3 macronutrients. It goes through the same process. But when you put a lot of alcohol in your body recognises it as almost a poison, and it wants to get rid of it, so it will metabolize that first. So if you're in a deficit, or you're trying to drop body fat and you're giving it alcohol, it's going to stop oxidizing fat, and it's going to oxidize the alcohol that's entered the body, because it wants to get rid of that first. So in terms of dropping scale weight, dropping body fat, you're actually disrupting the process when you give it alcohol, because the body, like I said, your body wants to get rid of that straight away. And I think off the top of my head, it's for around about 24 to 48 hours your body's just metabolizing alcohol. After, like, you know, obviously we could go on a night out and you'd have a big session, you drink a lot of ale, so your body then is not going to be burning fat like you'd want. It's going to be trying to get rid of the alcohol.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's down to like the binging, isn't it? It's like, obviously if you binge drink, then as you said, it could be up to 48 hours that it's burning all that alcohol off for. If you have one drink of a night, it's not really going to be that much of a difference, because it'll burn it quite quick. Don't get me wrong, it'll burn it first, but it'll burn it quick, and then you'll get back to burning all your proteins, carbs, fats. But if you, as I said on the podcast, the last one, if you save all those drinks up, all those 1 drinks a night up, and then have 2 bottles of wine over a weekend, it doesn't have the same effect. You are then stopping it for 48 hours.
Yeah,
go on.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, that's diet culture again, isn't it, as well? Especially if you are looking to drop body fat and you've got these stress responses, which for a lot of people is alcohol. If you're like a teacher, who I know a lot of, and like, oh, I've had a bad day at the office there, and I'm going to come home, I'm going to cane a bottle of wine. First things first, it's quite calorific, so it's hard to stay in a deficit if you're caning a bottle of wine. And then, as Nathan's touched on, it's not physically possible to oxidise body fat whilst alcohol is in your system. So, like, you need to piece that in, and maybe get out for your increased NEAT. So maybe if you've had a stressful day,
get a walk in.
Yeah, get a walk in instead of just turning to wine constantly. I help a lot of people who are in pain, who are in that sort of cycle where they might be in pain. You get a little bit down about it, and it's like, right, I'm going to have a bottle of wine, or I'm going to cane a 12-pack of beers to numb myself. Yeah. And it doesn't do that much great for somebody over the spread of time. So, like, obviously, stress response is a big one for nutritional fundamentals, definitely, because a lot of people, when they get stressed, will turn to alcohol. Now, if you're looking to improve health, or you're looking to improve composition, as we know there after listening to Nathan, it's quite difficult to oxidise fat whilst you're turning to that. So the option for somebody there might be, let's increase my NEAT instead of a wine. Let's go for a nice 30-minute walk, listen to a podcast, put some music on.
And I guarantee you feel far better off that than you would off the wine.
100%.
Or the ale or whatever.
Yeah, that's me. I go out for a run, go out for a walk if I've got like too much to do and I'm getting a bit of overwhelm with tasks. And I don't think I've ever felt worse off it. So, like, increasing NEAT through that metric might be better in terms of a stress response to nutrition, which is obviously coming through alcohol in that scenario.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be dedicating time to it to NEAT. It's like, you don't have to go, right, I'll go for a 30-minute walk. You can just go, right, I've got to go to the shops. What I'll do is I'll walk to the shops. You're still getting your tasks done in the day.
I'll walk for me wine instead.
I'll walk the bag and booze.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, that's it. It's everything. Like, you can incorporate NEAT into every single thing that you do.
Yeah, just to summarise on what we just spoke about there. So, basal metabolic rate, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, thermic effective food, and exercise activity thermogenesis all equate to our what's known as TDEE, so total daily energy expenditure. Now, what you'll find is if you do use the Harris-Benedict Formula, it'll only spit out your BMR, which is, as we know, like as we touched on, we don't want to be eating anything lower than that. So what you need to do is click on advanced mode, and it'll ask you how active you are. But where people go wrong here, people think that they're more active than they actually are. So they think, oh, I train 3-4 times a week hard. But do you train 3-4 times a week hard and, like we've said, go home and sit on the couch, or you have a desk job? Or do you train 3-4 times a week hard and you're very active as well in terms of NEAT? So you need to think about that, because lots of people overestimate their actual energy requirements. And again, it's an approximate guide. So you need to sort of take it with a pinch of salt and do a little bit of research with it. So get your calories, what it gives you, try them for a week, weigh yourself maybe, and then maybe you might need to alter them or change them slightly. So again, it's just an approximation, but it's a good metric to go off.
Yeah, it's a ballpark, isn't it? So it comes back down to like some of the other stuff again, what we've touched on in previous podcasts. Like if you are tracking calories, which again a lot of people at this time of year will begin to become accountable. The number it spits out is a ballpark. So like the idea is always to monitor and adapt and adjust as you go. So if you are looking to drop body fat, you plug in the numbers there and your scale weight stays the same for a month. Well, then you'll be eating at maintenance, so the number might need to be tweaked, as Nathan's saying. You might overestimate how active you are. So then you can either tweak the numbers in terms of your activity levels, or you can pull the total calories down if your goal is weight loss or a surplus if you want to eat more. So it's, as Nathan said, it's got to be taken with a pinch of salt, and it's a ballpark figure. So anybody who's listening or watching, don't get married to this specific number and think that you can never go over it or you can never fall under it. Your life is going to tweak based on a lot of different things, and it's got to be interchangeable and adaptable, like we've touched on in the past also with other topics.
Yeah, so once we've got that figure, we kind of we can use that as, like Chris just said, a guide to start manipulating things in terms of eating the same amount, so we can maintain our body weight, and then we can go into deficits, which is eating under that, or a surplus, which is eating over that, depending on what your goals are. But just a bit of a myth busting one in terms of deficit. Lots of people say, "Oh, I'm on a deficit diet," but a deficit isn't a diet. A deficit just means you are consuming less than your body needs to drop weight. And if you get people saying to you they've tried a deficit but they couldn't lose any weight, shock, you weren't actually in a deficit. So they're just, it's the laws of thermodynamics. It is what it is. If you're eating less than your body needs, you will drop weight. And it's the same with, like, I don't know if you've heard of the starvation mode. People believe that if you stay in a deficit too long, basically your body will go into starvation mode, and your metabolism will drop dramatically. And you do get a little bit of that metabolic adaptation, but there's no such thing as starvation mode. Otherwise, people wouldn't starve to death, would they? So it's as simple as that. But in terms of a deficit, if you're trying to lose weight, you have to be eating less than what your body requires. Now, how you achieve that is up to you. Do you achieve that with exercise or nutrition, or do you use a bit of both? I like to use a little bit of both at the start, and then once you hit a plateau, I don't like to reduce calories massively, so I would always say to someone, let's increase exercise. And that doesn't mean an extra gym session or an extra run. That can just be going from 5,000 steps a day to 7,000 steps a day. It's as simple as that. I'd always use, like we said, the low-hanging fruit in terms of let's move more. If you move more, you can eat more. So by dropping calories all the time, you're just making things harder for yourself, because you're physically starving yourself then, but you can still eat. For instance, my personal energy expenditure is 3,500, and that's only because I move so much and I train so much. So it's different from person to person, but so some people think you can't eat that much and maintain weight, but I can because I move more. So in terms of manipulating things like that, I'd always go for increasing NEAT rather than reducing calories. And then when you get to a point where you physically can't do as much exercise anymore, or because work or life, kids, all that kind of stuff, then maybe play with your calories and your food.
That's it. It's like when you go into like professional athletes and stuff like that, you've got like the swimmers, the Olympic swimmers. I think they're
10,000 calories a day.
Yeah, it's about 10,000 calories a day, and they don't put weight on. They're maintaining, if not lose. Well, no, they'll be maintaining because they're looking at performance, but they're not going to be putting weight on. Yeah, you give that to a generic person that's got a sedentary job at a desk, they're going to put massive amounts of weight on by having 10,000 calories a day, because they're only going to burn a little bit of that off.
Yeah. It goes like fuel the work required, isn't it? So like, that's like quite like performance nutrition-y style wording, but like you got to fuel the work required. So if you are a swimmer and your output is through the roof and you're looking to shave seconds off your PB, because that's the difference between being third or first, you got to fuel that work and put the energy back in. Now if you are just a gen pop woman who's looking to drop a stone, obviously you can sacrifice food, but as Nathan said, for anybody on the planet, I would look to increase activity first, because let's face it, food's great. we want to be eating food. It's great. Like, who wants to be sacrificing food they enjoy long term? I definitely don't. I know you two don't. So for me, if someone said to me, can you get out for an additional 30-minute walk a week and maybe include a low-level run but eat the same calories, I'm going to take that option rather than taking 500 calories off myself a day but then just staying at the same activity level. So for me, it's never about just like deficit and pull calories. It's about increase NEAT, improve training structure and adherence, build habits, and then when all that's got you to your plateau or like you start to level off, then we would look to pull calories. That's how I would personally prescribe it for somebody, because an increase in training, you've got to fuel the work required. If you've gone from, I've sat around all December doing nothing, and then you've jumped into, right, I'm going to do 3 training sessions a week plus a walk of a Sunday, or I'm going to take the dog out twice a week or whatever, that's an increased energy demand. So you need to increase what you put in for that energy demand, if you get me. So for me, increase NEAT always, then eat. So can you improve your actual training? But what goes on in the gym should be about, as Nathan said, like improving strength, building tissue, trying to get fitter, and then the scale weight style loss stuff outside of that, if it is that the goal that you're after, comes with the NEAT, as we've touched on.
So we've spoken about our total energy expenditure. We've spoken about how to get to that point and what to do to manipulate it as a starting point. So now we've got the basics underlined. Shall we go into a little bit more of the more complex things?
So yeah, we've touched on a lot of the fundamentals there in terms of how you would sort of calculate energy requirements basically for everyday life, adding in exercise on top of that, and then obviously some of the other social stuff like what type of job you've got and how active you are. Moving on now, we're going to go into sort of classic sort of macronutrient splits and like how you can set up targets based on body weight and based on your goals. As we touched on earlier, the 3 major macronutrients are going to be your carbohydrates, your fats and your protein, and how many grams of these you eat per day is going to equate to your total calories. So we've touched on the energy return per gram. Now we're going to go into some of like the sort of research or evidence-based suggestions what papers come out with for these macronutrients. So yeah, we're going to start with the big one, which is protein. I think the gold standard for it is anywhere between sort of, well, it used to be a lot lower actually, but I think
if
it's
you look at like
increased
what
now, hasn't it?
like the World Health Organization or the NHS recommend, it's like 0.6 grams per pound of body weight, which is, there's loads of research. We had this conversation the other day, didn't we? I think pretty much every research paper around protein supports the uptake of protein well beyond that of the daily recommended amount. Again, it depends on your activity, your body composition and what you're trying to achieve. But I think everyone should be going for 1 gram per pound of body weight at least. And then if you are in a deficit, you should be going up to 2.
Yeah. So the way I prescribe it for anyone I work with usually is to start with 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. You can also do it where you sort of prescribe it lean body mass, so many grams of protein for how much lean body mass you hold. But the sort of gold standard for me early on is to give somebody a gram of 2 grams of protein per kilo. So if you weigh 80 kilos, you're going to target 160 grams of protein per day. What you find with most people when I analyse like sort of eating patterns or totals and stuff is most people's carbohydrates are through the roof and the protein's too low. Now, if you are looking to improve body composition or performance or adaptation in the gym in terms of like building tissue, building muscle mass, that needs to go north, and more often than not, you need to pull carbohydrates down a little touch and usually increase protein. So like the way I would prescribe it would be 2 grams per kilo of body weight, as Nathan's touched on there. Like the old school stuff is quite low really in terms of like your 0.6s per pound of body weight, which leads us on then to sort of how you would fuel training, which obviously the king is carbohydrates. So that's the most readily available and used macronutrient in terms of energy for the brain and obviously the supporting muscles in terms of when you're training. So it's a big one in terms of recommendations, and it's probably not sometimes like just how much of it you eat nowadays. It's like the type that people eat, which may cause like the sort of biggest problems in terms of blood sugar and energy spikes and stuff. So yeah, let's touch into fuel and training performance through carbohydrates, which, as I say, is the king in terms of fueling your training. So yeah, let's go into that.
Yeah, so we know carbohydrates are the body's main source of energy. It's often the first thing that people go to when they're trying to drop scale weight. Oh, we're going to cut carbs. And you will drop scale weight, but it's not because you've cut carbs, it's because you've created a deficit by eliminating a whole food group. And like Chris has said, there's different quality of carbohydrates. So we've got complex and simple. Complex, like your grains, and then you've got simple, which is like your sugary stuff. So like even fruit, sweets, chocolate, cookies, all that sort of stuff. And so you can use them in different ways. Obviously, we know simple carbohydrates are going to provide like rapidly available energy. So if we're half an hour before the gym session, we've not had much to eat, we might go out. We use like squares bars and stuff like that. So I'd say don't be scared of having simple carbohydrates. Maybe if you're diabetic, that's something more you could look into. In terms of satiety, complex carbohydrates are always king because they keep you fuller for longer, they take longer to break down, they provide energy for longer. So that'll be like your oats, your rices, pastas, even bread, like sourdoughs and stuff like that. So there is different qualities, and I think it makes the largest amount of your calories per day. I think around about 60% of your calories should come from carbohydrates, but again, depending on your goal, you might want to manipulate that.
Definitely. So yeah, timing of carbohydrates is a big one, isn't it? As you say, like going into like your simples and your complexes. I don't know if you're half an hour away from the gym and your lifestyle's dictated that you can't prepare this big fancy meal of like your browns and like your brown pastas and your rices and stuff, and you need a marshmallow squares bar to fuel. For me, that's the pre-workout of the gods. Marshmallow squares, they're top end, they're easily to digest, simple sugars sort of thing, as we say. So like you're going to get that in, it's going to digest easy, it's light, it's readily available. So by the time you arrive at the gym, you're ready to use that fuel to fuel your training. And then what you do afterwards for your recovery is then massive. So like once we've looked at like fuel and training with carbohydrates based on like your simples or your complexes, after a training session, then what we're looking to do is combine carbohydrates with protein, which is going to refuel and regenerate. When we pair carbohydrates with protein after training, you're going to top up muscle glycogen, which is stored energy, which you will have depleted during your training if it's intense enough. And then your protein is going to allow you to regenerate tissue that you have broken down. Now, how well you repeat this process after training paired with sleep is ultimately going to dictate whether your body changes. So if like you empty glycogen stores, you break down loads of tissue in the gym, and then your sleep shocking, and your post-workout nutrition is shocking in terms of you don't refuel and regenerate, it gets very difficult for your body to adapt to that exposure that you've just given in the gym. So like looking into like nutrient timing and fuel and training, the gold standard is going to obviously be carbohydrates to fuel your training performance, because as we say, it's the most readily available. And then post-workout, we would ideally like to see a blend of carbohydrates and protein to refuel and regenerate. And that's a really loose framework that anybody can use. And then how much of that you need obviously comes back to the specific targets, like we touched on at the start with your BMR, your NEAT, your EAT, your total daily energy expenditure. So it's always got to be personalised, but when you're looking at loose frameworks, as we say, to fuel training performance, carbohydrate is definitely king in terms of performance. And then to stimulate the best recovery, a mix of carbohydrates and protein to refuel and regenerate. If you get that right and you pair that with really good sleep, you're going to be recovering well, which allows your body to adapt to what you do in the gym. If you're looking to improve training performance in terms of, I'm trying to hit a PB marathon, if you're looking to build tissue, how well you recover from that gym session through nutrition and sleep is the low-hanging fruit. And that's a thing a lot of people get scared of doing in terms of eating after a session, or like, what do I eat? Or they don't know how to pair it because they're in this deficit culture. So like how well you recover from training ultimately dictates whether your body changes or not. So that's a big thing that you have to get right continually, daily, repeatedly over the spread of time, is the low-hanging fruit, carbohydrates and protein post. and then really maximising sleep, which is where you do regenerate and growth hormone spikes and your tissue repairs. So that's a big one.
So we've spoken about proteins and carbs. Obviously, these are things that people are quite familiar with and understand what you need them for and what you use them for. Fats are something that people are scared of. I feel like people are like, oh, fats, you shouldn't have fat in your diet, stuff like that. Obviously, speaking on the last podcast, fat is a big important thing for your health, longevity, all of that. So where does fat come into it in a nutrition point of view for your daily intake? So we've spoken about proteins and carbs. So what about fats? Where do they come into it? Why do we need them? What do we have and what levels do we have of that?
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of different levels in terms of fats, and I think this is where the stigma comes from in terms of like if you're looking at like your deep fried type foods and stuff, and people are like, oh, it's high fat content and it's not good for you. You start to see cholesterol rise and all that type of stuff. From just like a baseline standpoint of why you need it, it's a macronutrient first of all, so like it's an essential that should be part of your day in a balanced format. Fats are going to be big for like hormone regulation and that type of stuff. So when we look into like female type stuff in terms of like hormone regulation, if you're really low fat, you're really low total calories, that's where stuff can start to go wrong. But I think the way I usually prescribe it, because it is a little bit more calorie dense, is and I'm not sure on the exact numbers from like what we were saying with the protein, but I usually go 1 gram per kilo. So if you weigh 80 kilos, you're going to try and target 80 grams of fat per day. Now obviously that's massively variant, it can change and it can interchange, but if you're looking to set up like a baseline of nutrition in terms of targets, the rough way to do it is obviously BMR plus NEAT. There's your basic energy requirements based on what you need at minimum plus what you do in terms of a day-to-day. And then feeding in from the total calories, you can start to prescribe targets. So 2 grams per kilo for protein, 1 gram per kilo for fat. And then you basically divide the rest with carbohydrates. Now, if you're looking to maximize performance, the timing of them carbohydrates matters then. So if you're training at 5 p.m, early on in the day, you might increase your fat and your protein intake and pull carbohydrates down. So like a typical office worker, a better choice might be something like an omelette or a smoothie early on in the day, which is high fat, high protein. You might go for like a salad at lunchtime, a chicken salad or whatever. Then when you're sort of getting closer to 5 and you know you're training at 6, you might look into your carbohydrate sources then. So like, could I have a piece of fruit, a banana, a marshmallow squares bar? And then afterwards, in terms of your training, if you're looking to improve performance and composition and all the other stuff we've touched on, that's where the bulk of your carbohydrates might come in. And so fat is obviously, it's essential, you need it. So yeah, like as we've said, diet cultures can sort of demonize fat and high fat and this, that and the other, and you see a lot of this in supermarkets and stuff now. Everything's labelled like low fat and all that type of stuff. That's from a diet culture where people are scared to eat it. But as we say, if you eat quality fat, it's something that you need and something that your body will benefit from. If you eat too much of it, like you do with any of the other macronutrients, it's probably not favourable. So too much is too much, regardless of where the source comes from. So yeah, performance-wise, I don't know many people who fuel off high fat, but from a health and a composition standpoint, it's a macronutrient that you need. Harnessing it for how much your TDE is going to be the main thing for it long term in terms of whether it's a favourable thing that you add in or not. So yeah, I'm not too sure on the data on it in terms of what the actual recommendations are, but
just to touch on I know going back a little bit here on the carbohydrate timing and stuff, I've read quite a bit of research around carbohydrate timing, and they recommend basically it goes back to caveman times. Your body stores fat because it's stored in energy, because it thinks at some point it's going to go a prolonged time without any readily available energy. So after exercise, your body is hypersensitive to glucose. It wants to replenish glycogen. So they recommend now that your first post-workout meal should be minimal protein and a lot higher than simple carbohydrates, and then maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours later, then you'll have then you pair them together in a more balanced fashion. Because like I was speaking to Matty the other day, there's no such thing as this like golden hour where people are trying to get protein in. I think the research now suggests it's anything up to 8 hours post exercise your body will still utilize. And those that do eat the first meal with a higher amount of simple carbohydrates, it actually supports the uptake of muscle protein synthesis. So in terms of strategies post workout, I would go minimal protein, high simple carbohydrate. This can be like a cereal and a protein shake, simple as that, and then we might go into something a bit more balanced. But yeah, just going back to fat, they always recommend when you look at like the pie chart from like the World Health Organization or the NHS, like it's the smallest amount of calories from. But you'll find again, the research supports the uptake of fat again because of how important it is for like hormone regulation. And we also have fat soluble vitamins, which your body can't utilize unless fatty acids are present. And I can't remember off the top of my head, Matt, you might have to Google it. I think it's vitamins A, D, E and K, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, Matty will find it for you. But yeah, without fatty acids, your body can't utilize them vitamins. So that's another important reason to include fat. And again, for those who are more endurance based, so triathletes, marathon runners, anything that's endurance event wise, more fat in your diet is massively important because these endurance events are usually done at zone 2 where we're oxidizing fat for energy. So there needs to be more fat in your body readily available to provide that energy. So again, it comes down to your goals and your lifestyle and your sport that you take part in. But it's very important, obviously. And again, we've got different types of fat. You've got healthy fats and unhealthy fats. So you've got like your monounsaturated, your polyunsaturated fats, which are really important in like cardiac health, your LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, those sorts of things. So it's massively important, and people need to, like you said, don't be scared of eating fat. It's really important for you.
Yeah, so your omega-3s and 6s, they're fats. Like, we all know, everybody knows how important your omegas are for your brain, heart, cardiovascular health and stuff like that. Fats are massively important, and you should never demonize them. I think they've got a tough rap with it because of the name, and people think if I'm getting fat, I'm eating too much fat. It's kind of like the link towards that name. It's weird. It's old school. If it was called something different, I reckon it'll be a lot less demonized. But you hit the nail on the head, mate. Those vitamins are bang on. So you've got A, D, E and K. They're all fat soluble.
It's good, isn't he? He half knows what he's talking about, doesn't he?
It's because he's tried a little faster. He's like, what vitamins can I have? But then when you go into the UK dietary recommendations for fat intake,
it's like 10% or 15%.
It's actually quite good, if I'm being honest. It says no more than 35%. So it's actually
maybe
quite
updated,
on the button there.
So it's balanced.
But then it goes into it and separates it into saturates, and no more than 11.
So that's the most important part, is the quality of fat you're eating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's with everything, though. That's with protein and with carbohydrates, isn't it? It's quality of food. You can get all of your macros with really poor quality food.
Yeah.
It's all about smart choices, isn't it? We spoke about it before on the podcasts. Smart choices are key.
Yeah, it goes into that the precision nutrition stuff that we sort of had a tweak with for you personally the other day there, Matt, in terms of the Mediterranean diet, and like what you'll see on the PN charts is like it'll give you the macronutrients, so like protein sources, carbohydrate and fat, and then it'll say eat more, eat less, eat often kind of thing. So it's like, as you say, you can get the totals in from any source. An example of that might be like, right, I'm going to have fried chicken versus sea bass. So sea bass, you're going to get healthy fat and protein.
Quality protein as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're going to have fried chicken, which is going to be high fat, like of the poorer variation, and protein.
Trans fat usually.
Yeah, that's it. So like you're still going to take the two macronutrients off, but the source of it is better, obviously, with the sea bass, where you're going to get like more healthy fat, more like sort of easily digestible protein, versus fried chicken, which is still the two same macronutrients. But it's obviously, it's fried chicken's great, by the way. So yeah, but that's as ever, everything in moderation. Yeah.
It's the same with your fats as well, isn't it? Like, just looking on that now, it says extra virgin olive oil, eat more of, because it's a Mediterranean diet, and what you need to eat less of, butter. Can you fill both of those? Can you fill your fat intake with both of them? Of course you can.
100%.
But it's quality, so the quality of olive oil is much more beneficial to your body than the butters, the margarines, sunflower oils, all the other types of oils that are like labelled as being healthier options to
and
olive
that's purely
oil.
because the lower calorie.
That's it.
And
It's just the
comes into the
calorie
diet
intake and
culture
the
again.
fat intake.
Like the fry light of extra virgin olive oil.
Shite.
Yeah.
Exactly. Fry light, you're going to go and it's, that's 3 calories.
Yeah.
Or olive oil, a drizzle might cost you 120, but the
Quality of
120
it.
calories is of much better quality of like what your body will utilise. So like, this is where you can't demonise food groups, and it comes into that sort of thing we've touched on in the past again in terms of health versus just weight loss or just body composition. You need to make better choices for long-term sustainable change. If you're just in a deficit and you're just going, right, how many shite calories can I fit into this deficit a day? So I know other people who do that. It's like, right, I'm on 1,400 calories a day and I'm going to squeeze in as much food as I can into this number. It's probably too low.
Yeah.
Swap your fry light for your extra virgin olive oil, even though it's more calories, because it's more beneficial long term.
Yeah.
Rather than squeezing as many poor calories as you can into this magic number, which more often than not most people feel like shite on.
Yeah, that's it. And
Yeah,
it's
just
diet.
to add on the olive oil thing, I looked at a research paper in America where they got a group of people who were overweight.
Yeah.
They got them to cut out things like mayonnaise, margarine, butter, and they just swapped it for olive oil.
Yeah.
And all they dropped scale weight, but the cardio metabolic adaptations were like blood pressure, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, they all improved massively just off swapping poor quality fats for the high quality
Just one
fats.
simple tweak, yeah. That's it.
So in terms of health,
Yeah.
fats is so important.
Yeah. And that's it. When you look into the med diet, obviously on the last podcast, it was the fat intake from the olive oil that was the key variable on the health benefits in enough all of the research that was going on in the past. So as you see, it's more about life and longevity of life and being fitter
That's
for
the key,
longer.
isn't it?
Yeah, like anyone can be fit for a couple of months or a year, but are you going to be able to keep that up for the rest of your life?
Yeah, feel good. Do
Yeah.
you feel good? Have you got energy to complete the most basic of tasks? So like, have you got energy for your kids? Can you get out of bed every morning? Do you want to train? Do you want to go to work? Or do you just get up with dread, with zero energy, poor sleep, poor concentration, poor cognitive function? These are things that a lot of people who you will help have.
Yeah.
Low energy, no sustainability of energy. So yeah, it's massive moving forward in terms of like, as Nathan's saying, one simple tweak can make you feel better. And when you feel better and you're looking to improve health markers and all the other stuff that we've touched on, like weight loss, body composition, stuff starts to happen. So like simple tweaks go a long way if you repeat them constantly. As we're touching on there, like it's great just banking calories and saving as many calories as you can. But if long term it's not the better choice, then it's not the better choice, as you touched on with the Mediterranean diet. Like the biggest like sort of health problem in the world is like cardiovascular disease, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you're looking at like numbers now in terms of obesity rates rising, them two things go hand in hand. So if you're obese, you're more exposed to cardiovascular disease and issues. Now, when you think about that, like in terms of making tweaks and you're going to improve cardiovascular health, you're going to pull body fat down, it's a no-brainer. But the culture of like the deficit culture nowadays is that like everyone's just trying to make alternatives and swaps for low calorie.
Yeah.
Doesn't always mean it's the best thing for you long term. So have a little think about what you're doing right now, and have a little think about if you would still be doing it in 10 years' time. If you wouldn't, it's probably not the best thing to do, although you can still live that way and obviously push for a 6-month shred, or you want to drop 2 stone, that's great, yeah. But if you're sacrificing these macronutrients and micronutrients within this poor deficit that you're in, you got to think about long-term change and adaptation to make sure that you are healthy and you feel good. If you feel terrible on a low-end deficit and you're fitting as much crap as you can into this magic 1,400 calorie target or whatever it is, it's not going to be sustainable long-term, which comes into the fundamentals of nutrition. Is you want to eat a balanced nutrition like strategy or whatever you want to call it, or meal plan, and you want to feel good from it. Food's great, so you want to eat food that makes you feel good long term. Goes without saying.
Yeah, I think all we're getting at here is a much bigger picture than calories alone.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're trying to drop scale weight, trying to drop body fat, that's quite an important variable. But in terms of longevity, health, performance, there's a far bigger picture than just calories alone. That's just a number. But the quality of food that you're eating is far more important than the actual calories. And like I always say, athletics builds aesthetics. So if you're training well, you're eating a nice balanced diet, regardless of your goals, you're going to drop body fat, and you're going to probably build tissue as well if you're training in that sort of way. So yeah, like I said, it's a far bigger picture than just calories alone. And I think people need to get away from that sort of scaremongering of, like you said, you can achieve, you can reduce scale weight by eating shite alone, can't you? But in terms of health and longevity, it's not gonna. You're just gonna feel like shit really, and it's not really gonna do much for you. So yeah, there's a far bigger picture, and people need to look at the health rather than just a number on a scale, because the number on a scale doesn't define who you are. It's your health, how you feel, how you perform. That's far more important.
That's it. And the scale weight doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to look any better. Scale weight can just, like, if you put weight on, you might actually look better than what you did beforehand, because you've reduced your fat, but you've built tissue, and you've become more shape to your body. The scale weight is the easiest thing to measure, but it's the easiest thing to just misinterpret.
That's it, yeah.
Because if you want to reduce scale weight, why do you want to reduce that?
Like I said, that number doesn't define you, and that comes down to like people being impatient and going a massive deficit, and the scale weight's going to come down, but you're going to look terrible when you look in the mirror. Best thing to do is do it slowly and steadily. It's a lifestyle change. It's not a diet. We're talking about a lifestyle change to improve health markers as well as body composition. So it's always best to just do it little, just a small deficit, 200 calories, 300 calories, not 500, 1,000. It's more sustainable. And then when you get to where you want to be and you go to maintain, you're going to be able to maintain that. What we see these yo-yo dieters, people dropping massive amounts of weight because they're cutting out carbs or cutting out whatever they're cutting out or doing whatever they're doing. And then as soon as they go back to a regular eating pattern, because they've not changed any of the habits, they just go right back to where they were, or sometimes, in some cases, even worse. Even heavier, even fattier.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big, that, like what we're touching on there specifically is a big one within like females. So like, they kind of diet forever, but they don't actually quite diet, or they're kind of thinking that they're in a deficit forever, but they don't quite actually ever get anywhere. So like loads of females I have coached in the past, and I'm sure everybody else who's in the industry has, like, they'll come in and they'll go, I've been trying forever to drop this 2 stone, and I've never felt comfortable, and I've never been happy in my own skin. It's like, have you ever thought about just doing it different? Maybe go into a surplus for a little bit and really drive training performance. Really have the option where, like, when you're eating more, you can get more energy out. You may feel better. You might have more energy. You might go for your extra walk into the neat stuff that we've touched on. And then you can pull down. So you'd almost create a new set point, as we're saying, about, like, body composition and feeling good. Like, if you're fueling training and you're wanting to feel good, you just cannot be in a half-assed deficit forever. It just can't happen, because you're either in one or you're not. So like, you got to go all in on it and be consistent as possible, or you just come away from it and find a new set point. Now, a lot of girls I coach are looking to, they say they want to drop scale weight and they want to lose fat, but what they actually need is to build more tissue and get stronger. So the first thing I do is go, right, I'm going to put you into a sneaky surplus, without telling you. Because if you tell a girl, right, we're going to try and increase muscle mass, most girls will go, don't want that, I'm going to go big and bulky, which is very difficult to do, because as males, with the different hormones and all the rest of it, it's quite hard to put muscle on naturally. So most girls on the planet would benefit just going into a surplus, building tissue, find a new set point with your deficit numbers. And then if you do want to drop body fat and you want to drop scale weight, great, but you can't be in a deficit forever, because performance improvements and strength and building tissue typically don't happen there. So obviously, if you're looking into like weight governed sports and stuff, like, you're trying to drive performance, but like, if you need to hit a certain number on a scale, it's a weight governed sport, and that could be the difference between getting paid or not. So that's a different conversation. But looking really into like body composition and how you feel within yourself, you cannot spend the rest of your time in a deficit but just not actually get anywhere. You're just spinning your wheels forever. So like, for me, eat more food, and as we touched on earlier, move more. So like, don't pull stuff away, add in. So add in an extra walk with the dog each week, go for a long walk of a Sunday if all you usually do is sit on the couch of a Sunday and rest. Add in some structured training rather than pulling away energy in constantly. That's going to serve you a lot better long term, and you're definitely going to look and feel better doing it that way and eating more and exercising more rather than just pulling yourself down to this magic deficit.
Just want to add to that, sorry lad.
Yeah, go on.
Just to add to the female thing, a lot of females don't realise there's a thing called a female athlete triad, which is basically, like Chris has said, he's worked with girls before, females who are in like chronic deficits, and basically what happens is you get low bone mineral density, your menstrual cycle starts to disappear or becomes irregular, and you get what's called low energy availability constantly. So this happens when females become in that deficit for too long. Now we know through science that females are more susceptible to osteoporosis. I think it's as early as 30 or 40, something like that. Now if you're susceptible to that earlier on, and you're still reducing your calories to the point where it's affecting you even more, the chances are you're definitely going to get it when you get to that age. So you can, if you're experiencing any one of them symptoms, the chances are you're not eating enough, and it can be really detrimental to your health, especially for a female. So that's something that females really need to do the research on and try and combat it. And the best way to do it is resistance training, eating more calories, like Chris has said. The majority of the time, what they want to do is, like you said before, they want a big ass on big legs, and it's tissue, that's muscle.
Yep.
So on the scale, they're going to look heavier, but they're going to look far better when they look in the mirror. So that's where like scale weight isn't everything.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about like the cycles and stuff like that, it's hormones, and the reason why is because they're not getting all the macros and the micros that they need to have, and the reason for that is because they're trying to drop their calorie intake massively. Yeah. Whereas from what you said before, take a different approach, just increase your eat, and then you can have the calories that you should be having, and you'll get all the vitamins, the minerals, you'll get all of that within your diet, and then that will help towards later in life the osteoporosis and stuff like that, and keeping a regular menstrual cycle. And
it's obviously, like, if you're looking to have kids in the future, it's obviously very important. So if you don't want to be messing up your hormones to the point where you get to into your late 20s and you want a kid, and then because you've absolutely ruined yourself when you was younger trying to be dead skinny and the smallest number possible on the scale, and you've ruined that chance of your life, sort of thing. So it's really important for females.
Yeah, you've got to fuel your body, haven't you?
Yeah, short term it's going to be performance driven, long term it's going to be health driven, isn't it? So like if you eat more, you're going to perform better in the gym, you're going to recover better, and your body's going to adapt to what you're doing. Yeah. Long term, as we say, that's going to be like that type of stuff what Nathan's touching on, into your health and ultimately like where you want your life to go. So yeah, short-term performance, long-term health. If you can combine them two things well, you're winning. If you're sacrificing energy in and your performance gets worse in the gym, your recovery gets worse, your adaptation gets worse, and then this is where you might experience some of the other health-related problems long-term. So it's chronic, isn't it? It's anything you do is if you're doing it chronically, it's probably just going to cost you something. And as we've touched on in previous podcasts, you don't get to choose whether you pay or not. It's how much you pay, or how much the decisions you make now cost you long term. Anything you do now in terms of training, nutrition, it will cost a certain amount of tax, and how much you pay is based on how good or bad that choice is. If you do it chronically and it's a bad choice in terms of you live in a deficit, it's going to cost you something long term. Yeah. So we can't diet forever. That's the big takeaway.
Yeah, that's it. Like dieting as in
like a deficit.
Dieting in a deficit is not a long-term solution, it's a short-term. It should be adapted to go into a deficit, and then you adapt again to go into a surplus to build tissue, and then maintain. That's the key to it, is by maintaining. Your diet should be able to do everything. Your diet shouldn't be, I'm in this diet just for a deficit. It should be manipulating the diet to suit what you want to do at this time.
Adaptable and inclusive, not exclusive. In terms of getting rid of stuff, it's about what you can include, not what you'd have to get rid of or what you can't have.
Of course. So just before we finish up, do you want to just remind people on the equation to Google?
It's just the Harris-Benedict Formula. click on the top link, put in your details, age, sex, height, weight. That'll give you BMR. Then you can click on advanced mode, and then that'll give you like a more rough calories for your for every day sort of thing. But just before we finish, I just wanted to touch on a couple of little not myths, but just a little
side note.
A little extra information. I've got them on my phone here actually. It's just
Go on.
One of them is like there's 10,000 steps a day. That's like, there's no magic, it's not a magic number. That actually came about from a study, I think it was in China they did, but there's actually a linear relationship between the more you move, your health, your fitness, and that can start from as little as 2,500 steps a day. So if you're a sedentary person, just by doing 2,500 steps a day, you're going to see some benefit.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be 10,000 steps a day. If you can hit that number, great. If you can do more, even better. But if you're sedentary and you can just move a little bit more, you're going to see benefits.
Increase your exposure to where your baseline is at the minute.
That's it. It's any increase, isn't it? Some people might be operating under 12,000 a day, and if they might need to increase, they're not going to decrease it.
Yeah, everyone's just different.
You're not going to go back down to 10,000. You're going to go up, aren't you? You're going to try and increase that more.
And then the final thing was just in terms of, I touched on it on a previous podcast, but there's 3,500 calories, 1 pound of fat. And I know people have this thing where if they overeat for one day, they're like, oh, their head falls off, I'm going to have to do 100,000 steps the next day to burn it off. But like we've spoke about, you've got your thermic effective food, so you need to take that into consideration. So the more you eat, the higher thermic effective food is. So if you're, for instance, your daily energy expenditure is 2,000 calories, that would mean you'd have to eat 5,500 calories to gain a pound of body fat. But that's been proven not to be accurate either because of the thermic effective food.
Yeah.
And a recent research paper suggested you would have to eat over 7,000 calories on top of your maintenance calories to actually gain a pound of body fat in 24 hours. So if your maintenance is 2,000 calories, you'd have to eat closer to 10,000 to actually put a pound on overnight. So when you wake up in the morning, you weigh yourself and it says it's a kilo heavier, you haven't physically put that much on in fat. It's just water and glycogen and all that kind of stuff. So you don't feel the need to just like your head falls off and panic, just get back to normal.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well about people weighing themselves every day or every week. It's like
become quite unhealthy sometimes.
Yeah, it's a very negative thing to monitor regular. If you monitor it over a long period of time, it can give it a little bit of information, but just have a look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Just see what you feel like in the mirror. But again, don't do that every day. Yeah. And do it at the same time every day. Don't be doing it in the morning one day and then after a big meal the next day. If you're doing it after a big meal, then obviously your body's not going to look the same.
You get a bit of bloated and all that sort of stuff. You're just going to feel like shit anyway, but chances are...
It's where you're trending, isn't it? Yeah. Where you're trending long term comes back into the chronic stuff, as Nathan's saying there. Like, with them numbers there, that suggests that you have to chronically overeat.
Which is pretty tough to do.
Body fat. Yeah, it's so it comes into like your habits and all that type of stuff, what you turn to, but... the word chronic is massive because, as we've touched on, if you're in a chronic deficit or with them numbers there, you have to chronically overeat to really gain a lot of body fat. The big takeaway is to begin to move more with more intent. Start with some of the basics like we've touched on. So if you are setting up nutritional targets and numbers this year, that should be the basis of where it comes from. And then if you're fueling training performance, as we've touched on, carbohydrates, protein, but it always comes back to including stuff. So include a full balance of carbohydrates, protein, fats, make it adaptable for what you do. So if you're starting to train in the gym and you're looking to build tissue, you might need more protein and carbs and all the rest of it, and fats obviously for total calories, but it's adaptable. And if you are beginning to start to look into numbers and targets, for me, it's the place to start, because your BMR and your NEAT is what you require at minimum based on body to function plus what you do in terms of movement for lifestyle. And the lifestyle is the big takeaway. What your lifestyle is like is going to dictate how much energy you require on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so as long as you're making smart choices in your food and stuff like that, as long as you're not eating like chronically bad food, like really processed food and stuff like that, don't look at reducing your calorie intake. Yeah. I think that's what we're saying. The starting point should be, right, okay, let's increase our output.
Yeah.
So let's
increase a bit more,
yeah. And that's it. That's where you should start at, because I'd probably say 95 to 99% of people can increase their NEAT.
Yeah.
100%.
Because we all jump in our car and go to the shop when we could easily walk there in 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
And we've got the time to do that.
Yeah.
But we just jump in the car because it's easier.
Yeah.
So let's increase our NEAT, and that will in turn, your body will thank you for it.
Yeah. Really good starting place. And then we can look into what side of the nutritional equation we go from there based on people's goals and targets. But yeah, moving more chronically is never going to do anybody any harm.
Never.
It's going to improve health and your body composition long term.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice place to start and finish
Yeah.
within the podcast sort of thing.
So just to summarise, get yourself on the internet, find out your calories, manipulate them to however you need them to be, and go from there. Try and move a little bit more. But it's not a plug, but we do offer just nutritional coaching. So if someone's interested in finding out a little bit more, just shoot us a DM over and we'll be happy to help them out.
More than happy to prescribe some targets for people and coach them through the process, which is a big one. Develop habits, as ever, with a big background of education, so that when people leave us, they carry the tools forward for the rest of their life, which is going to give them long-term sustainable change, as ever, like we always touch on.
That's it. We just want people to live a long and healthy life, and that's
and do it
the
properly.
big thing. Yeah,
Do it properly. Don't live in extremes.
Yeah.
Feel good. Have energy. And reap the rewards.
Live happy.
Yeah.
That's it.
Happily ever after.
So on that
Amen.
note, we'll finish this podcast here.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Cheers.
Thanks
Next
for
one.
watching.